So as I said, so we started with the panel and we have the Milken Institute. We have one more study to help set the context before we bring up the rest of the practitioners. One of the things I said earlier, changing nature of work, future of work, that's a big conversation. And the two big questions are, how do we bring more people into the workforce that have chronically unemployed, underemployed, whatever, and how do we retrain existing workers? These two questions, particularly in light of the changing labor force, the dynamics of automation, are huge. I was attracted to a study, the title alone that McKinsey put out, What the Future of Work Will Mean for Jobs, Skills, and Wages. I was attracted to this not because it had the final word, but because it presented scenarios. It presented alternative scenarios of what the future might look like. And I thought that that was just the best way for me to think about all of these changes, right? Because anyone who says they know what's going on, I mean, there's no crystal ball. So with that, I am very proud to introduce Manisha Shetty Gulati, who is a partner at McKinsey, and she runs their social philanthropic partners division, which means that she works with all these different social partners, including Philanthropy, to take these different findings and highlights from the McKinsey reports and helps philanthropists and others think about what the implications may be for their work. So please, Manisha, join us and share a little bit about what the future holds for wages, jobs, and salaries. Thank you.
Perfect. It does work. Automating the PowerPoint. Hi, everyone. It's really great to meet you today. So, what is this? In 2016, there was a truck that drove, sponsored by a company called Otto, that transported 51,000 cases Budweiser beer across 130 miles of Colorado highway. But what's unusual about this picture is that there is no driver in the driver's seat of this truck. And for many, this was an ominous sign, right? A sign of a future in which truck drivers will be replaced or at best relegated to co-pilots in a world where they'll be replaced by automated vehicles. And in a country which employs close to 2 million drivers of heavy trucks for a living, that can be a bit scary, right? And others said, no, this isn't gonna happen. It's at least 20 years away. We don't have the infrastructure. We don't need to freak out about things like this. So what's the reality, right? And in a way, the truck drivers have become emblematic of a larger debate about the role of automation and the impact that it will have on the future of work. So lots of things are actually very beneficial about automation, as we know. It's increased productivity, efficiency, safety, convenience, but these same technologies are also causing questions about the future of jobs, skills, wages, and as we already talked about, the nature of work itself. So the first question is, will robots actually take our jobs, right? While the media paints extreme pictures, it's not that simple. So what McKinsey tried to do is to take jobs and actually break them up into discrete activities or tasks to see whether those activities could be automated. So you can think of it as like tasks with automation potential. So that allowed us to look at over 2,000 activities across 800 occupations in the global economy. And what we found was that actually there are very few jobs that can be fully automated, so less than 5% of the total jobs. But when you look across all the tasks or activities that we do and we pay people to do in the global economy, over 50% of them can be automated with technology that we already have today. So that's a lot, and it will impact a lot of us. So the question is, what kinds of activities are we talking about here? So the biggest ones that can be automated are ones, as you would predict, predictable physical labor. So over a fifth of the time that US workers spend working is on predictable physical labor. So that's in sectors like manufacturing, like in retail trade, in food service. So that's highly susceptible. But it's also jobs related to collecting and processing data. And that means occupations that range all the way from lower skilled to the most highest skilled jobs. So for example, even CEOs, we found that 25% of tasks could be automated. So that's good news. But the difference is that for CEOs, yes, good news for all of you, looking forward to that, yeah. But for CEOs or for radiologists, let's say, technology allows them to operate at the top of their license, you can say, which is to use their skills to the best of their ability and to not spend time on, data collection or data entry, right? But for others, like for example, the London taxi driver whose skills are based on passing the knowledge test, right? Or electricians who are skilled at their trade, when automation comes into play and you can use a GPS instead, or you have a remote sensor that understands what's wrong with people's houses, the skill itself is actually the thing that's being automated. So that causes a huge difference in the impact to people. But not everything will be automated. I'm pressing the wrong button. So we still need new skills too. So things like interacting with stakeholders, applying expertise to decisions, creative tasks, managing people, all of those will still continue to exist. And we will need, as we already talked about earlier today, more nurses. We'll need more creative people, designers, engineers to take on these roles, caregivers in the home. But so it's going to be a growth in jobs as well as a transition for most people. So the question is, are the jobs going to go away? No, not entirely, but there will be a huge amount of transition. So we believe that over a third of the US workforce will actually have to transition between roles between now and 2030. So that's going to cause a lot of dislocation. So then it's a question of, well, how fast will this happen? So as Joe said, right, there's no crystal ball. We don't know exactly what's going to happen in every sector, but what we do know is that the pace and scale of how technology is adopted will be slower than the pace of the technology itself. So even though I said that 50% of tasks today can already be automated, when you actually look at the incentives to adopt that technology, it's actually going to take until 2035 to 2055 to actually automate the tasks that we already technically can automate. And so what is that, why? What are the factors there? So to go back to the truck driving example, so even though it's technically possible, you have to go back to the business case as to whether you should actually adopt this or not. So first of all, you need to look at wages. So in the US, actually up to 75% of the ground shipping cost is labor, right? And so there's a huge incentive to automate. But in emerging markets where wages are much, much lower, you think actually it doesn't make sense to do it. You also have to think about the cost of scaling and adopting the technology. So in a truck driving example, do you need to retrofit, or do you need to replace your whole fleet? And what are the management and IT systems that you'd actually need to build up in order to run the system? So that has a big impact on adoption as well. And then finally, there are regulatory and social factors. So policy will be really important. What are the road safety laws, and will they adapt in time? And how do we actually make it amenable for society to change in that way? So in a way, part of it is technological advance, and that will continue to happen. But a lot of it is how we control, both through policy and how business adopts technology, that will impact what actually happens as this plays forward. So this will also differ by country. So in countries which have higher wages or bigger reliance on sectors like manufacturing, the adoption rates will be much faster. So for example, Japan is actually the highest in terms of the scenarios. But in countries with younger working populations, as well as lower wages like India, which is actually a large percentage of the workforce in the next 20 years, technology adoption will be slower. So all these factors are in play. But the good news is that actually there will be more jobs created than jobs lost, right? So if you actually look at the pace and scale of how this is happening, it's actually, the magnitude is not that different from the decline in working in agriculture and the share of manufacturing in the US economy over the last 100 years. So it's actually, the order of magnitude is the same. And just like with both of those transitions, there were jobs created that were unforeseen at the time that actually eventually took the place of those jobs. And the other thing too is that we actually need, going forward, every ounce of human labor working alongside robots to fill the productivity gap that's going to be caused by the fact that workforces are shrinking because of aging, both in developed countries, but also developing countries like China. So if we take a step back, there's going to be a lot of change, but there will be more jobs gained than lost, and the productivity that automation will bring will actually be sorely needed if you actually look at trends in terms of workforce going forward. So the challenge then is the mismatch, right? Because when you look across the different industries, more than 60% of occupations have at least a third of activities automatable, which means that the nature of work even within jobs will change as we work alongside machines, which we're already doing, right? But then the transitions as well. And so I said a third of the American workers will need to transition jobs. If you think about that fact, on top of the fact that 80% of US incomes have actually stagnated or declined from 2005 to 2015, that poses a problem because also most of the people who will have to transition are middle skill workers without college degrees. And so in a way, automation can exacerbate income polarization because there's going to be more demand for higher skilled jobs and middle skilled jobs are going to be less. So really the question is, how do you support this transition? So what can philanthropy do to encourage a good outcome? So it was already said earlier, governments and businesses are doing things, but businesses have bottom line to deliver. Governments have it's hard to act fast, although many cities and states are doing amazing things. And philanthropists can take a longer term view without election cycles and without short-term focus, right? And you can experiment more. So what can you actually do? So you're gonna hear a lot of great solutions today. It's very exciting. Investing in human capital. So not just in terms of reskilling workers going through transitions, but thinking about the education system going forward. We're going to need more technical skills like coding and automation, but we'll also need softer skills like teamwork, like being able to manage people and applying expertise to decision making, right? And also thinking about vocational skills. So what does that mean and how do we actually match local labor markets to the skills that young people have? And how does that differ in terms of certification? Labor market dynamism, so matching between employers who need jobs and people looking for jobs. You talked about Amazon earlier today. It's actually hard for employers when you talk to the private sector to figure out from people's resumes or their high school degree or college degree what skills they actually have and can apply. So how do we change the way we think about skills or certification, and how do we actually help match using technology perhaps, the same tools that are causing these trends to help alleviate some of the side effects to match and think about also remote working when mobility is a problem. And then finally, transition support. So transition support is everything from, what actually happens when people need more time to reskill, when people move from the formal economy into the informal economy or the gig economy. Do we need portable benefits? Do we need to provide cash incentives for people to actually reskill and retrain themselves? More labor rights in the gig economy. What does that actually look like? So you can experiment, figure out what works, build a knowledge base, and then advocate for policy change where necessary. So at the end of the day, there's a lot we can do. And for the 400 to 800 million global workers that will go through transitions over the next 20 years, there's a lot that we can do. And, for the truck driver that may go one day the way of the dictation secretary, that person has just the right to get new skills and new jobs as anyone else. So we can play a huge difference in actually seeing how this plays out going forward. So thank you. We do actually have the full report if you want to see all the details of, all the different job categories and what that looks like, and they'll be in the back by the end of the day.